A. Smith Show. Before I get on out of here, I had to talk about a story that's very, very important. And albeit indirectly, it involves...
The moment the entire sports world had been waiting for finally arrived, and it didn't come from a championship game or a record-breaking performance. It came from a television studio where one man with the biggest microphone in sports decided he'd had enough. Stephen A. Smith, the face of ESPN, a man who has spent decades defending the business of basketball, went absolutely nuclear on live television. His target? The commissioner of the WNBA herself. And when the smoke cleared, everyone knew that women's basketball would never be the same again. This isn't just another sports controversy. This is the story of how incompetent leadership almost destroyed a golden goose worth billions, and how one man had to scream what everyone else was too afraid to say. For months, the WNBA had been sitting on a pressure cooker ready to explode. You had three forces colliding at once. First, the arrival of Caitlin Clark, a generational superstar who single-handedly changed the entire landscape of women's basketball. Second, a league that had spent 28 years struggling in obscurity, completely unprepared for the blinding spotlight suddenly shining on them. And third, a bubbling cauldron of jealousy, resentment, and identity politics that was threatening to poison everything from the inside out. When Commissioner Cathy Engelbert finally sat down for what should have been a routine interview, she didn't just drop the ball. She spiked it into the ground, lit it on fire, and walked away like nothing happened. That was the moment Stephen A. Smith decided enough was enough. To understand why Smith's reaction was so explosive, you need to understand what Caitlin Clark's arrival meant for the WNBA. We're not talking about a typical rookie season here. We're talking about an economic revolution that happened virtually overnight. Before Clark stepped onto a professional court, the WNBA had been operating at a financial loss for its entire existence. 28 years of being subsidized by the NBA, losing an estimated $10 million every single year. The league was fighting for relevance, begging for airtime, and struggling to fill arenas. Then everything flipped. Chartered flights that players had been demanding for years suddenly became the standard. Attendance in arenas hosting the Indiana Fever spiked by over 150%. Television ratings weren't just good for women's basketball, they were beating Major League Baseball games and rivaling NBA playoff numbers. The transformation was absolutely staggering. Stephen A. Smith recognized what was happening immediately because he's a business-first analyst. He understands that in the world of sports media, there's one simple rule that trumps everything else. You protect the asset that pays the bills. He started calling Caitlin Clark the Golden Goose, and he wasn't being cute or clever. He was stating a fact. When Tiger Woods revolutionized golf, the PGA bent over backward to accommodate him, changing tee times and restructuring tournaments around his schedule. When Michael Jordan turned the NBA into a global phenomenon, the league marketed him like a deity, building an entire empire around his image. This is standard operating procedure in sports. You find your superstar, you protect them, you promote them, and you ride the wave as far as it'll take you. But strangely, bizarrely, the WNBA didn't follow this blueprint. Instead of rolling out the red carpet for their meal ticket, the league's veterans and even the administration seemed to view Clark's arrival with suspicion that bordered on outright hostility. The warning signs appeared before the season even started. Diana Taurasi, one of the greatest players in WNBA history, made comments that felt less like mentorship and more like gatekeeping. Her infamous quote that reality is coming for Clark became a rallying cry for people who seemed more interested in seeing the rookie fail than watching the league succeed. Cheryl Swoops, another legend, made similar remarks that dampened the excitement instead of amplifying it. Stephen Smith latched onto this immediately, questioning why the old guard was so intent on throwing cold water on the hype. Why would you tell the world your new star is going to struggle? Why not sell the dream and ride the momentum? It was a marketing failure from day one, and Smith called it out as something you rarely see in men's sports. When Victor Wembanyama entered the NBA, LeBron James called him an alien and praised his potential to the heavens. When Caitlin Clark came to the WNBA, she was essentially told to get in line and wait her turn. The contrast was jarring. As the season progressed, things went from uncomfortable to dangerous. The narrative shifted from tough competition to something much darker. Everyone watching could see that Caitlin Clark was being physically targeted on the court. This wasn't the normal welcome to the pros physicality that every rookie experiences. This was targeted aggression designed to intimidate and injure. The incident with Chundi Carter became the flashpoint that exposed everything. Carter hip-checked Clark to the floor in a play that was nowhere near the ball, a move so blatant and unnecessary that even casual fans knew something was wrong. Then Carter appeared to brag about it on social media afterward, as if physically assaulting the league's biggest star was something to celebrate. Stephen Smith went on air the next day absolutely furious, not just at the foul itself, but at the league's pathetic response. It took the WNBA office days to upgrade that foul to a flagrant one. Smith argued that the league was asleep at the wheel, allowing their golden goose to be physically brutalized while officials swallowed their whistles and pretended everything was fine. He warned then that if Commissioner Engelbert didn't step in and protect her star, things would only get worse. He was right. The situation was compounded by what might be the biggest marketing blunder in modern sports history. The decision to leave Caitlin Clark off the Team USA roster for the Paris Olympics. The selection committee tried to justify it as purely a basketball decision, claiming she hadn't paid her dues yet and needed more experience. Stephen Smith saw through that excuse immediately and called it exactly what it was. A massive, catastrophic missed opportunity to grow the game on a global stage. Smith argued that the Olympics isn't just about selecting the 12 most skilled players. It's about expanding the sport's reach and bringing in new audiences. By leaving Clark at home, USA Basketball and the WNBA sent a clear message to the world. Hierarchy and tradition matter more than star power and fan interest. Nobody in Europe or Asia was tuning in to watch veteran role players. They wanted to see the phenomenon everyone was talking about. The decision proved that the people running women's basketball were operating with an outdated, archaic mindset that was completely detached from the realities of the entertainment business. Smith called it stupid, plain and simple, and millions of people agreed with him. But all of these incidents, the hard fouls, the Olympic snub, the passive-aggressive comments from veterans, were just kindling waiting for a spark. The fire was lit by the toxic behavior of the fan bases. The rivalry between Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, which dated back to their college days, was always going to be a major storyline. Rivalries are fantastic for sports. Magic Johnson versus Larry Bird literally saved the NBA in the 1980s, pulling the league out of financial disaster and turning it into a cultural phenomenon. But the Clark versus Reese rivalry turned toxic at lightning speed. It stopped being about basketball and became a proxy war for race, politics, and culture. Social media transformed into an absolute cesspool, with fans from both sides hurling racism, misogyny, and vile harassment at the players. Dejounte Carrington, Angel Reese, and Caitlin Clark herself were all caught in a crossfire of online hate that was spiraling completely out of control. The players were suffering, the league's reputation was being destroyed, and everyone was waiting for leadership to step in and shut it down. That brings us to the interview that changed everything. Commissioner Cathy Engelbert appeared on CNBC, a major business network, to discuss the league's unprecedented growth. The interviewers asked her a direct, specific question about the dark and toxic narratives exploding across social media, particularly the race-based hate that players were enduring daily. This was the ultimate softball question for a leader. All she had to do was look into the camera, condemn the racism in the strongest possible terms, make it crystal clear that there's no place for hate in the WNBA, and promise to protect her players from harassment. It should have been the easiest slam dunk of her career. Instead, Engelbert fumbled the moment in spectacular, almost unbelievable fashion. She didn't condemn the hate. She never even used the word racism. Instead, she pivoted to a sterile, corporate answer about how rivalries are good for business. She actually brought up the Magic Johnson and Larry Bird comparison, essentially suggesting that the toxicity poisoning her league was just a natural side effect of successful marketing. The level of tone deafness was absolutely shocking. By refusing to denounce the behavior, she practically validated it. She told the world that as long as the ratings are climbing and the money is flowing, the WNBA doesn't really care how nasty and hateful the conversation becomes. That was the moment Stephen Smith decided he'd seen enough. On first take, he didn't just disagree with the commissioner. He systematically dismantled her credibility in a rant that was precise, calculated, and absolutely devastating. He started by accusing Engelbert of a dereliction of duty, which in the corporate or military world is a fireable offense. It means you have fundamentally failed the basic requirements of your position. Smith argued that a commissioner's primary responsibility is to protect the shield, meaning the integrity of the league and the safety of its players. By trying to play both sides and refusing to alienate the toxic portions of the fan base, Engelbert failed everyone. She failed the players, she failed the fans who wanted to celebrate the sport, and she failed the league's future. Smith then tore apart her absurd comparison to Magic Johnson and Larry Bird. He pointed out that while that rivalry did involve racial dynamics, it was never fueled by the kind of vicious hatred and vitriol that social media enables today. More importantly, NBA Commissioner David Stern knew how to manage that era. He didn't let players physically assault each other without consequences, and he certainly didn't smile and call it good business when asked about racism. Smith accused Engelbert of trying to financialize hate speech, mistaking engagement numbers and trending topics for legitimate marketing success. It was a brutal takedown of her business judgment and leadership skills. Smith also connected the commissioner's silence to the toxic culture festering in locker rooms across the league. He has sources everywhere and knows what's happening behind closed doors. He alluded to the very real resentment toward Caitlin Clark that exists among some players and veterans. The commissioner's refusal to publicly support her rookie superstar had emboldened the bullies. When the boss says rivalries are good for business while one player is getting face-guarded and hip-checked 94 feet from the basket, the players interpret that as permission to continue the targeting. Smith argued that Clark was being hung out to dry. She was generating all the revenue, paying for the charter flights that veterans were now enjoying, and in return, the league hierarchy was treating her like an unwanted intruder. The most damaging part of Smith's argument focused on the missed opportunity for unity. He noted that both Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese are victims in this situation. Two young women thrown into a culture war they never asked to participate in. A strong, competent commissioner would have brought them together, issued a joint statement condemning the hate directed at both players, or held a press conference to set the tone for how the league would handle the controversy. Engelbert did absolutely none of that. She remained essentially invisible throughout most of the season, only appearing for interviews where she made things worse. Smith contrasted this with commissioners like Adam Silver of the NBA or Roger Goodell of the NFL. You might not personally like those men, but when massive controversies hit their leagues, they step up and control the narrative. Engelbert let the narrative control her. The backlash to her interview was immediate and proved Smith right on every point. The WNBA Players Association released a scathing statement shortly afterward that explicitly contradicted their own commissioner. The union's executive director stated clearly that racism is not a rivalry. When your players' union has to publicly correct you because you weren't harsh enough in condemning racism, your leadership has catastrophically failed. Stephen Smith highlighted this internal rebellion, pointing out that Engelbert had somehow managed to unite the players against her. She lost the locker room. By trying to be diplomatic and appeal to everyone, she ended up with no allies at all. Smith also addressed the uncomfortable topic of jealousy and race that was simmering beneath everything. He'd been hammering this theme all season. Many people in the WNBA ecosystem, including media members and veteran players, were resentful that a white player from Iowa was receiving what they saw as the savior treatment, being credited with single-handedly rescuing the league. Smith navigated this sensitive territory by acknowledging that race is absolutely a factor in how the story is being covered, but ultimately the money is green. It doesn't matter who generates the revenue. You should be grateful it's coming in at all. He ripped into the narrative that Clark needs the WNBA, flipping it completely. The WNBA needed her. The league existed for almost 3 decades without ever turning a profit. Clark arrives and suddenly everyone is getting paid more, traveling better, and playing in front of actual crowds. Smith's message to the commissioner and the haters was simple and direct. You don't have to like her, but you better respect the business she generates. Engelbert was eventually forced to issue a written apology attempting to clarify her position, stating that she unequivocally denounces hate speech. But as Smith pointed out, it was far too little and way too late. You can't unring that bell. When the cameras were on and the pressure was real, she revealed her true priorities. She showed herself to be a corporate suit who viewed toxicity as a key performance indicator rather than a cancer destroying the sport from within. The apology felt like it was written by a panicked PR team, which only reinforced Smith's argument that she lacks the natural leadership instincts required to manage a crisis. This entire saga exposed a terrifying reality. The WNBA might not actually be ready for the big time. Smith's rant wasn't just about one incompetent leader. It was a warning shot to the entire organization. You cannot demand NBA-level salaries and NBA-level media attention when you're operating with G-League-level management. The scrutiny has arrived. Every statement the commissioner makes will be analyzed. Every questionable foul will be reviewed in ultra-high definition. The days of flying under the radar and hiding dysfunction are over forever. The WNBA is at a crossroads. They have an incredible product with exciting games, undeniable talent, and compelling storylines, but the infrastructure is crumbling under the weight of its own unexpected success. Stephen Smith has positioned himself as the watchdog, defending Caitlin Clark not because he's a fanboy, but because he's a capitalist who sees a billion-dollar asset being mishandled by people more interested in protecting egos than making history. The golden goose is still laying eggs, but if the leadership isn't careful, that goose might fly away or worse, get cooked by the very people who were supposed to protect it. Smith has drawn a line in the sand. The old way of doing things is over. The Caitlin Clark era demands excellence, accountability, and real leadership. And if those things don't materialize, Stephen Smith will be the first one screaming about it to millions of people.